Mr. Cooley, proceed when you're ready. You'll be presenting
AB 2367, 24/7 sobriety program. Mr.
Thank you.
Chair.
Please proceed.
Very good. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. I'm delighted to bring to you AB 2367. This bill proposes a local option for judges of a 24/7 sobriety program as an adjunct to the use of intoxication detectors you have in courts. We have a 4-county program currently in California, including here in Sacramento County. Mr. Senator Hill is bringing a bill to us that would make that a 58-county program. This bill would add the option of a 24/7 alternative for the courts to impose a requirement that a person get tested twice a day, either by a breathalyzer or a transdermal sensor, a bracelet that detects the presence of alcohol in their sweat. And I think the important part of this bill, and before I continue, I want to note that there's some suggested amendments on page 3, also page 4, removing subdivision G, and I accept those amendments, and I thank the committee consultants for their assistance in that generally. You know, California in the 1980s was groundbreaking in our work on DUI, and we really set the pace for how you deal with DUI. I think we are now in a time when we can be innovating once again, expanding programs, strengthening how we deal with this in a strong, aggressive way. It continues to be a source of carnage on our roads, and I'm pleased to bring forth this bill, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cooley. You have witnesses in support. Please state your name and who you're representing, please.
Mark Weideman on behalf of Intoximeters in support today. Intoximeters is a company that has been in the alcohol breath testing business for over 70 years. We have had experience with 24/7 programs in a number of other states. They have proven extremely successful in reducing recidivism, repeat offenders in the DUI realm. We are in strong support of this bill here today.
Any other members of the public that have want to testify in any support of the author's bill? Seeing none, any members of the public that would like to testify in opposition to the author's bill? Please state your name and who you represent, please.
Mr. Chairman and members, I'm Aaron Wade, Program Manager with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. First, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Mr. Cooley for his steadfast and consistent support for Mothers Against Drunk Driving's efforts in reducing the incidences of impaired driving. I would further like to thank Mr. Cooley for his agreeing to amend this bill, as he just mentioned, in the manner that addresses our concerns and assures that any implementation of the 24/7 program in California will not inadvertently reduce the effectiveness of the highly successful Ignition Airlock program. Finally, I'd like to thank the committee staff for their hard work in helping resolve this issue, and based on those amendments, I'm happy to report that Matt has officially removed their opposition to this bill. Thank you so much.
Well done, Mr. Cooley. Any other members of the public that would like to testify in opposition to the author's bill? Seeing none, any members of the committee have questions of the author? Mr. Cooley, would you like to close?
Well, I just again want to thank you, Mr. Chair, and your staff, the committee staff working on this. I want to thank Mad. I shared with Mad earlier in this conversation that I met Candy Leitner back in the 80s when she lost her daughter, came here to the Capitol. Wearing my hat of chief counsel to the old F&I committee in the late 1980s, which was a time of dramatic increase in auto insurance rates. I had a hand in a number of the changes we made to the DUI statutes in there, both really through the F&I committee as we tried to deal with what drove insurance costs, and drunk driving was a factor in that. So I know the innovative work of this legislature in this area, and again, I think we are poised to do that yet again, and I thank the chair and his staff for helping with this process. Request your aye vote.
Mr. Cooley, as you know, driver safety is my paramount concern. The legislature should do everything it can to give the courts every tool they need to combat drunk driving while allowing offenders an opportunity to put their lives back together. However, I am also sensitive to the concerns that have been expressed on the specifics of this bill. Not one technology should be mandated to the exclusion of another. The court should have the discretion to require 24/7 sobriety, ignition interlock devices, or whatever combination is appropriate for each particular situation. One size does not always fit all. I encourage the author to continue to consider amendments to require a robust data collection system also, and options for these programs in a pre-trial pre-trial context. I hope you will continue to work with all the bill stakeholders as it moves forward to address those concerns. And as a father who lost a child, it's paramount that this bill moves forward. Thank you. With that, I'll be supporting your bill. Madam Secretary, please call the roll after I do the motions. We have a first by Mathis and a second by Chu. Madam Secretary, please call the roll. Thank you.
The motion is due pass as amended to the Assembly Appropriations Committee. Frazier?
Aye.
Frazier, aye. Linder? Baker? Baker, aye. Bloom? Brown? Brown, aye. Bloom, aye. Chu? Chu, aye. Daly? Dodd? Eduardo Garcia? Gomez? Kim? Mathis? Mathis, aye. Medina? Medina, aye. Melendez? Nazarian? O'Donnell?
Mr. Cooley, your bill has 6. We'll keep the roll open for absent members.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much for this bill.
Thank you very much.
Assembly Member Waldron, Assembly Bill 2227, please. Good afternoon. Please proceed when you're ready, Assembly Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee. AB 2227 came from a local police officer after they faced difficulty citing individuals with different license suspensions that then caused bodily injury. AB 2277 makes it unlawful for a person, while driving with a license that has been suspended or revoked for reckless driving, to commit an illegal act by law while driving a vehicle where the act or neglect causes bodily injury to a person other than the driver. This bill will also require the minimum sentence for that offense. Currently, Californians driving on a suspended license offense is a misdemeanor that subjects offenders to possible county jail times and substantial fines. This crime is treated differently depending on why a license was suspended or revoked in the first place. Despite the law, 2/3 of offenders still continued to drive while under suspension. This bill is important for public safety, as dangerous drivers should not be on the road. AB 2227 is supported by the California Police Chiefs Association, and here I have with me Jonathan Feldman, representing the Police Chiefs Association, in support.
Chair and members of the committee, Jonathan Feldman with the California Police Chiefs Association. We are in support. This did arise from one of our police department's struggles with finding parity between the penalties for a driver driving with a suspended license for DUI, causing an accident and hurting someone, and drivers driving with a suspended license for reckless driving, continuing to disobey that order and hurting someone. We believe that the same kind of disregard for public safety shown in both cases is similar. Someone who continues to drive after DUI and hurts someone is showing the same disregard for others that someone who gets a suspended license for reckless driving and hurts someone. And so we are in full support of this bill and would request your aye vote.
Any other members of the public that would like to testify in support of the author's bill? I have a first by Mr. Kinson-Chu and second by Assemblymember Baker. No members of the public in support of the bill. Any members of the public in opposition to the author's bill? Seeing none, any members of the committee have questions of the author? Seeing none, Assemblymember Waldron, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is a serious reason why licenses are suspended in the first place, and people need to respect that and the lives of others on the road. I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Waldron. Well, it's not immediately clear that this bill will change how reckless driving offenders are punished. You know, driver safety is one of my biggest concerns and one of the reasons I'm here. I was torn. That's why I gave it a none recommendation, because I wanted to hear your testimony and in public and see why this was important to you. With that, I'm looking forward to you working forward I will be supporting the bill today, but working forward so that it becomes more clear what this will accomplish going through the committee. So, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
The motion is due pass to the Assembly Appropriations Committee. Frazier?
Aye.
Frazier, aye. Linder? Baker? Aye. Baker, aye. Bloom? Aye. Bloom, aye. Brown? Chu? Aye. Chu, aye. Daly? Dodd? Aye. Dodd, aye. Eduardo Garcia? Gomez? Kim? Mathis? Aye. Mathis, aye. Medina? Aye. Medina, aye. Melendez? Aye. Melendez, aye. Nazarian? O'Donnell?
Ms. Waldron, your bill has 8. 8 votes. We'll keep the roll open for absent members. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bloom, Assembly Bill 1982. If you're ready to proceed, we're ready for you. Okay. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Members,
Please proceed.
today I am presenting AB 1982, which would add 2 members with expertise in environmental justice to the California Transportation Commission. The CTC has an important mantle to represent the interests of all Californians, and this bill would make a substantial step to ensure that the Commission is truly representative of the entire state. The CTC plays a critical role in allocating funds to statewide transportation projects, as you know, and currently none of its 11 voting members are specifically required to have expertise in public health or environmental justice. That's problematic when you consider that transportation investment has historically, and I think this is the important thing here, transportation investment has historically been a major factor in segregating and disrupting disadvantaged communities and exacerbating their health disparities. Approximately 21% of Californians live in zip codes that are considered highly impacted by the negative effects of transportation. Residential air pollution from freeways and major arterial roads overwhelmingly burden low-income communities of color. Safety risks to pedestrians and bicyclists sharing the road with automobiles are also higher in these communities, where many residents walk and bike by necessity if they cannot afford a car. Although it's apparent that we must shift investments to address the mobility and health needs of these communities, transportation funding decisions have not, in fact, kept pace. For example, even though CTC's active transportation program was made to ensure that disadvantaged communities would benefit from funds for bike and pedestrian planning, the CTC allocated only a small percentage of grant funds to that end. Limited knowledge of the needs of these communities has limited the effectiveness of well-intentioned projects. AB 1982 would add 2 members to the CTC who are experts in public health and environmental justice and who work directly with communities that are most burdened by and vulnerable to high levels of pollution. This will give the Commission additional balance and perspective when making decisions for financial investment. AB 1982 would strengthen the Commission and allow it to make more informed transportation investment decisions that will benefit all Californians. And that's why I ask for your support on this important measure and respectfully ask for your aye vote. With me today, Mr. Chair, and members are Jeannie Ward-Waller with the California Bicycle Coalition and Katie Valenzuela with Breathe California.
So please state your name and who you're representing.
Jeannie Ward-Waller. Good afternoon, Chair and members. With the California Bicycle Coalition, we're one of the co-sponsors of this bill. Roughly 10 million Californians don't drive because they can't afford a car. In order to travel in and around their communities, to get to school and work, to participate in our economy, and to strive to live better lives, these individuals walk, bike, and ride transit by necessity. These individuals are students, seniors, mothers and fathers, youth, people working in the service industry or healthcare, construction, agriculture, or education, or trying to start a small business. These individuals are the backbone of the California economy, yet they struggle every day to get around a transportation system that does not work for them. These individuals predominantly live in low-income communities of color all over the state. As our U.S. Department of Transportation Secretary Anthony Fox has recently championed publicly in his new Ladders to Opportunity campaign, our system of roads and highways have deliberately and systematically been built through low-income communities of color in almost every city in America. Our past highway investments have destroyed, displaced, polluted, endangered, and cut residents in these communities off from opportunities. In order to right these wrongs, we must very intentionally prioritize the needs of and address the impacts on low-income communities of color in our future investments. And to do that in an effective way, we must lift up voices that represent those communities at the highest level of our transportation decision-making process, at the California Transportation Commission. Without representation that understands the specific needs of Californians that don't drive and that are burdened by rather than benefiting from our current transportation system, we will continue to marginalize and ignore the needs of these residents. Adding 2 members to the CTC that represent low-income communities of color and the burdens of pollution and health disparities that they face will be a significant step toward creating a healthy, sustainable, affordable transportation system for all Californians. We want to thank Assemblymember Bloom for taking on this critically important issue and respectfully ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed with the next witness. Please state your name and who you represent, please.
Yes, thank you. My name is Katie Valenzuela Garcia. I'm with Breathe California. We're happy to be co-sponsors of this bill. In my off time, I represent my neighborhood on the AB 32 Environmental Justice Advisory Committee for the California Air Resources Board. And I'm here to testify to the success of this model by drawing on the successful implementation of AB 1288, which was approved by the legislature just last year. In the few short weeks since former Senator Dean Flores and Diane Tavorkian assumed their seats on the California Air Resources Board, we have seen a marked improvement in our relationships with staff and in the implementation of our recommendations as environmental justice advocates. Senator Flores and Diane have lived and worked in our communities. Their experience and competencies made them uniquely qualified to build a bridge between communities and the agencies that they work with. We know that this model works because it's working right now at ARB, and we would love to see similar reforms at the California Transportation Commission, and we urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other members of the public? Sir, would you like to testify in support of the bill? Please do state your name and who you represent, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Rico Mastrodonato with the Trust for Public Land. Both the environmental and public safety burdens of transportation infrastructure in disadvantaged communities. Would like to see those voices on the CTC. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly Doe on behalf of California League Conservation Voters in Support.
Thank you.
Quentin Foster on behalf of California Environmental Justice Alliance in support.
Thank you.
Erica Rincon with Policy Link. In strong support, it is long overdue that we ensure our transportation system accounts for the needs and priorities of our most vulnerable people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chanel Fletcher, Climate Plan, in strong support.
Thank you.
Joshua Stark with Transform in support.
Thank you.
Chelsea Tu, Public Advocates in support.
Thank you.
Bill Sadler, Safe Routes to School National Partnership in strong support.
Thank you.
Tony Dang with California Walks in strong support.
Thank you.
Leticia Corona with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability in strong support.
Thank you. Any other members of the public that would like to testify in support of the bill? Any members of the public that would like to testify in opposition to the author's bill? Seeing none, any members of the committee that would like to ask questions of the author? Mr. Dodd, excuse me, I'm sorry. Mr. Bloom was on my mind.
I can ask myself a question. It's all right.
In general, I don't have much problem with this, but I guess it defies. The governor has appointed people to this position that are looking out for communities of concern, disadvantaged communities. Right now, off the top of my head, I don't have the whole list in front of me, but Yvonne Burke comes to mind as one that is on that committee. So the idea that disadvantaged communities are not being represented on the CTC may be flawed. The other thing is, as soon as Cal EPA comes out with an EnviroScreen that shows that there's disadvantaged communities in and around the Bay Area, I might get a little bit more excited about this. But frankly, I don't want to do anything more that promotes their idea of where disadvantaged communities are when we can't even get those classified in or around our refineries and in places where we have heavy industry throughout the Bay Area. So
I'll ask Ms. Ward-Waller to add a comment to your last point, but before she speaks, I want to make it clear that this bill does not purport to say that no one has ever represented disadvantaged communities on the CTC. What this bill does is require that from this point forward, there will be at least 2 seats that are reserved to address the needs of that community.
And I just wanted to speak to your point about the EnviroScreen tool. This bill does not specifically refer to the EnviroScreen tool and calling out who those representatives are or which communities they represent. And in fact, the Transportation Commission, in its work with the Active Transportation Program, has used a much broader definition of disadvantaged community, which includes not only the EnviroScreen identified communities, but it also includes census tracts that are identified as low income using census household income data, and it also calls out areas that are adjacent to low-income schools based on a federal definition of student attendance with students that qualify for federal reduced price meals. So this is a much broader definition that encompasses about 45% of the population and covers more areas that don't get captured in EnviroScreen as disadvantaged communities.
And that definition is included in this bill, in the language of this bill?
We actually don't say disadvantaged communities. We say communities that are low income or are highly burdened by pollution. So we have not defined it. We can if that's important, I think.
Assemblymember Dodd, I'm well versed in the shortcomings of the EnviroScreen as the chair of Budget Sub 3, where we're overseeing the cap and trade program that specifically calls out disadvantaged communities, and many people have concerns about the EnviroScreen. We're trying to figure out ways to broaden how even the cap and trade budget can address those issues, but they're difficult and complicated, but we're working on it. I think this may be one model that we can follow there.
Any other questions of the committee of the author? Seeing none, Mr. Bloom, would you like to close?
I ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be supporting your bill today. As you know, the only established criteria right now with regard to the selection of commissioners is to achieve geographic balance between north and south and urban and rural. And I actually serve on that CTC as an ex officio, and I do attend every time I can when they call these. And I would say the disadvantaged communities are represented well by some of the members there. Former assembly members, members of the bike and ped community, they're there. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to configure the board based on representation of various interests. I think if we're going to do it this way, a lot of varying interests need to be taken into account and not piecemeal this. As it was mentioned with the AB 32 committee with the representation of CARB. There are definitive reasons why they're there. We are not including logistics, freight, trucking. All of the components of the CTC oversight would have to be completely reconfigured to be able to accommodate the interests of everybody. This, we're singling out one entity as important. Unfortunately, the bill would elevate disadvantaged communities and their interests above all others. And we can't have that. So for this reason, I'll be opposing the bill today, but I look forward to working with you on an opportunity how we can actually create an opportunity like CARB to have specific entities being represented in the transportation world. We do have a first by Mr. Mathis. I don't have a second. Mr. Gomez, we have a second. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
The motion is due pass to the Assembly Appropriations Committee. Frazier?
No.
Frazier, no. Linder? No. Linder, no. Baker? No. Baker, no. Bloom?
Aye.
Bloom, aye. Brown? Chu? Chu not voting. Daly? Dodd? Eduardo Garcia? Gomez? Gomez, aye. Kim? Mathis? Mathis, no. Medina? Medina not voting. Melendez? Melendez, no. Nazarian? O'Donnell?
Your bill has two. We'll keep the roll open for the absent members.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Assembly Bill 2382, Assemblymember Lopez. please proceed to the podium. Good afternoon, Ms. Lopez. Please proceed when you're ready.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Today, pleased to present AB 2382, which will create a spot to the High-Speed Rail Authority Board Director for someone from the disadvantaged community.
Move the bill.
This individual must be certain requirements, which will include: 1, must be from the disadvantaged community; 2, the person is not currently a former elected official. Now that the high-speed rail project has a cap and trade funds, it's important that communities that funding means has direct voice in how they are being used. AB 2382 will make sure that people are being heard in the communities, have a voice in the table. And I respectfully ask for your vote.
So any members of the public that would like to testify in support of the author's bill? Please state your name and who you're representing.
Jenna Price on behalf of the California League of Conservation Voters. We are in strong support. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public that would like to testify in support of the author's bill? Seeing none, any authors or any members of the public that would like to testify in opposition of the author's bill? Seeing none, any members of the committee have questions of the author? Ms. Lopez, would you like to close? I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. Mr. Gomez. I think it was a late arriver.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lopez, I appreciate you bringing this bill forward. In the end, right now in Los Angeles, we don't really have the trains not coming yet, and we don't know exactly when it'll get there. Late arrival, I guess. But eventually, it's going to end up cutting through into my district. I represent near downtown LA, Union Station, but also a series of let's not use the word disadvantaged, but economically disadvantaged communities that lack representation, communities that don't really have an ability to hire their own attorneys. They don't have the ability to contact their leadership. You don't see them as much as you would in other areas. If we did, then I wouldn't feel that this would be necessary. But having somebody from a underserved community to have them on the board to make sure that their voices are heard and provide a different perspective would be helpful. I know there's a disagreement about if this is necessary, and I think there's some valid points on that. But just for my district and the areas that I know I represent, and sometimes they're left behind, and sometimes they're not really considered in the discussion, I'm going to vote aye on your bill. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the members? Because I'd like to see if there's a representative from High Speed Rail here to address Mr. Gomez's statement and comment coming forward. Looks like we do have one. So, Mr. Gomez, there will be an opportunity so that you can have your statement addressed. Please state your name and who you represent, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Barbara Rooney for the High Speed Rail Authority. Assemblymember Gomez, you made reference to the high-speed rail train coming to Southern California. As many of you are aware, we've just presented before this committee a few weeks ago and presented our draft business plan, had a discussion on that. The authority presented its plan to change the sequencing of the rollout of the high-speed train. And as we discussed, the plan will be initially going north. But I just want to reassure you, Assemblymember, that the High-Speed Rail Authority intends to build out the entire system. At the same time, we will be going north, as we talked about during the hearing. we will be making concurrent investments in Southern California that will realize some real tangible improvements in that area. So again, I just want to reassure you, while the train is being sequenced initially to go north, it is committed to building out the entire system, the Phase 1 system, which will get us all the way into Southern California. You will actually see dollars being spent making improvements in Southern California long before you'll see the train running in Northern California.
With that, could you also address Assemblymember Gomez's comments about the underserved people in his district that wouldn't have the ability to be represented, right-of-way issues or whatever impact they have?
Certainly. It is, as I think it was noted even in the analysis, current law covers quite a bit, and we all have to adhere to those laws with regard to the use of cap-and-trade dollars and the 25% going to disadvantaged communities. The entire train, if you look at that, and I believe ARB has looked at that, has identified that the train does in fact meet the requirements as stated in statute with regard to the disadvantaged communities. So we are hitting all of those. And as you know, Chairman, we are in the Central Valley where there's a very large disadvantaged community that you're well aware of.
Yeah,
so, yes.
I appreciate that. I had the opportunity to tour the facility and talk to some of the folks that were impacted and felt they were very well treated by the authority. So I really do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Ms. Lopez, would you like to close?
I just want to make sure that we have a voice in how the money is spent for that high-speed rail, and yet I don't see any report saying, especially in my district, saying how they're going to spend the money, and I don't see it. They take the real serious our recommendation. That's why I'm presenting this bill.
Thank you for that. We do have a motion by Assemblymember Linder and a second by Assemblymember Gomez. Ms. Lopez, unfortunately, I won't be supporting your bill today. Right now, the high-speed rail appointments do not have a specific qualification for requirements. By adding a representative to the board now with a specific requirement, your bill would be elevating one issue over other priorities for this project. For those reasons, I'll be voting no on your bill. But when we talk about how CARB has representation throughout the industry, we're looking at a template that I do believe that works. And so I'm looking forward to you working with the authority with your concerns and making sure that Mr. Gomez and yourself have the representation or make the relationships now with the authority so that your voice is heard. With that, Madam Secretary, please call the bill, the roll.
The motion is due pass to the Assembly Appropriations Committee. Frazier?
No.
Frazier, no. Linder? Aye. Linder, aye. Baker? Aye. Baker, aye. Bloom? Aye. Bloom, aye. Brown? Chu? Chu not voting. Daly? Dodd? Dodd, no. Eduardo Garcia? Gomez? Gomez, aye. Kim? Mathis? Mathis, aye. Medina? Medina not voting. Melendez? Nazarian? O'Donnell?
Ms. Lopez, your bill has 5. We'll keep the roll open for absent members. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon. Assembly Bill 2253, Assemblymember Grove.